Barely 2 weeks to go for Tunisia to hold its legislative elections. The head of the UGTT, the Tunisian General Labour Union, Naruddin Taboubi, said during a speech on Saturday, described the election slated for December 17, 2022 as undermining the country's long-fought democracy. According to the leader of the UGTT, the union no longer accepts the current part and meets the disputed reform for the constitution, which has greatly reduced the role of political parties, mostly the opposition. Taboubi says the elections expected to be held on December 17, 2022 will have neither taste nor color, as President Kais Saied of the North African country's constitution was not approved by a majority. Could this decision to reject next month's elections impact the political trajectory of the North African nation? We shall be finding out attempted answers in today's edition of Talking Points. Stay with us. Good day, African the world. Thank you immensely for serving the rendezvous once again over your Pan-African television for you, Media Africa. Well, today we are discussing Tunisia, Northern Africa, as we are picking interest in what is going to happen to the country as the trade or labor union there in the North African nation has decided to reject December 17 presidential elections that is meant to, of course, design the political trajectory of the North African nation. And joining me as guest this afternoon, I have Dr. Asong Michael Kuma, who is a member of the Rwandan Bar Association and a member of the East African Law Society. Thank you immensely for joining us, sir.
Thank you, Madam Sharon, and thank you to all our viewers.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. Later on, we shall be joined by Mr. Nje Lucas, who is a political analyst and as well a human rights activist based here in Cameroon. Before we get down to discussing today's topic of discussion, ladies and gentlemen, listen to this report compiled by the news desk of For You Media Africa.
Tunisia's powerful labor union in a recent outing has rejected the general elections called by President Kais Saied slated for mid-December 2022. UGTT's leader, Naruddin Taboubi, said in a speech to thousands of supporters on Saturday that the union no longer accepts the current part as it hides a lot for the fate of the country and its democracy. With over 1 million members, the UGTT is the country's most popular, powerful union. Until recently, it has largely avoided directly opposing Saied. According to Taboubi, they are firm on defending the rights and freedoms of the people at every cost. Taboubi said that the election expected to be held on 17 December will have neither taste nor color due to Saied's constitution that was not approved by a majority. The economy in Tunisia has greatly worsened as Saied has implemented significant cuts to subsidies that affect millions of ordinary Tunisians. Most political parties are planning on boycotting the polls.
Political parties in the North African country are planning on boycotting December 17 polls, which is meant, of course, to determine the new president for the North African country after the parliament was dissolved there in Tunisia. And, of course, a new constitution was put in place, which was not accepted by a majority. And, of course, I earlier mentioned that we are joined by Dr. Asong Michael Kuma, who is a legal expert, joining us all the way from Rwanda, sir. Having listened to this report, the first question I'd like to ask you is, how do you underscore the political situation that is playing in Tunisia, given the new constitution and the proposed elections slated for later this month?
Yes, and Sharon, thank you for the question. The political situation in Tunisia actually is very, very unstable. And this is for many reasons. First of all, we know that last year, President Kais Saied decided to dissolve the assembly, the National Assembly, if I can call it, or the People's Representative Assembly, which is a monocameral type of National Assembly in Tunisia. It is worth mentioning also that these powers were being granted to President Kais Saied under the 2015 Constitution of the Republic of Tunisia by its Article 77, which actually gives him powers to be able to dissolve the National Assembly, or the Assembly of Representatives, if I can say better still. And due to these powers which were being conferred onto him, he took it as an advantage to dissolve this representative assembly, and this actually led to some sort of instability in the country, because he first of all started off by suspending them in July 2021, and finally in March 2022 he decided to dissolve it. So what were the main reasons why he decided to dissolve the representative assembly of the people? One of the reasons were the fact that it was being alleged that there were several parliamentarians or representatives that were actually threatening national security, and to actually counteract the act of the people's representatives of the assembly, so that he could benefit more from power. So many in Tunisia have seen his act as that of dictatorship, noting well that even in July, the 15th of July 2022, when a referendum was being issued or made for the new constitution, we realized that Tunisia, having a population of about 12 million people and having about 9 million registered voters, we realized that only 2.7 voters participated in this referendum for the new constitution and the new republic. So this actually portrays that the whole nation is not actually with President Kais Saied, and that due to this very weak participation, we actually question the legitimacy of the constitution. More to that, we have the National Consultative Instance, which is a body which is in charge of proposing a draft constitution to the president. Its president, called Mr. Sabuk, actually said that the constitution which was being ratified and being promulgated through the referendum was one which they did not even propose to the president. That the president, Kais Saied, actually drafted this constitution on his own. So looking at all these problems, we realize that the political situation of Tunisia is really unstable. We have a Tunisian president who is using all the malice of the law to be able to conserve power around him and to stay longer in power through an authoritative type of regime.
Thank you immensely for the detailed introduction. I believe even those listening to us at home are able to understand what is happening in the North African nation of Tunisia, given the political instability, or political instability as you termed it, that is happening there. Now, given what has been happening with protests, as you earlier stated, the dissolution of the National Assembly there in the North African country, protests have been against President Kais Saied. Do you think that this December 17 elections that are supposed to come, it's coming at the wrong time?
Well, I can obviously say that it's coming at the wrong time, because everything is going so fast. Everything is going so fast. Decisions are being taken rapidly, and people don't have enough time to assimilate and understand the reasons why all these different decisions taken by President Kais are being done. And this obviously gives us the impression that we have one man holding on to power, sticking on to it, and struggling to use these powers to control everybody. It's well mentioning that according to the previous constitution of Tunisia of 2015, Tunisia is a Republican country,
Yes.
and it is democratic. And this actually means that there should be a full participation of the population as concerning the matters of the state. Sovereignty belongs to the population and not to an individual, even though it is being exercised by that individual. It therefore means that the population at any time can claim the powers which belong to them. So, with all the difficulties happening now, we clearly see that the population is not for it. And that's where we have the Tunisian General Labor Union that is coming to play a significant role in this by saying that these elections are not correct at this particular moment. So what I want to add to this is that we must know that this trade union has about 1 million members. So we can imagine how powerful is this trade union, considering the fact that there are so many members and it's been affiliated to the International Union of Workers. It's been affiliated to the Arab Trade Union, and we see its capacity to be able to influence so many things in Tunisia. Noting fully well that during the Jasmine Revolution in 2021, it is this same trade union that actually helped in ousting out President Zine Adin. So it is very clear that if this labor union stands against these elections, things will be very, very difficult. And they have said that their reasons are they don't actually accept the political agenda of President Kais Saied. They think it is very individualistic, and for that reason, they think that these elections will be another way for him to actually express this authoritative power which he has been doing since the last referendum of July 2022.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Asong. I shall be coming back to you. We're just getting indications that Mr. Nje Lucas is with us here. Of course, good day to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Jigs, and good afternoon, televiewers. It's a pleasure of being online this day. It's rather unfortunate that I just left a meeting ground, and while still in the car, I have to participate on this program, given that it's a program which we all have to speak and put together all what has to be, especially in Africa, because if we do not do this, these are things that are moving across. I want to begin by applauding the trade union in Tunisia for this. I think this is a clarion call for Africans to rise up, and we have to stamp out authoritarianism, because you cannot get up at a particular point in your life where you change the constitution and you are now calling for elections. And I am happy because the leader of the trade unions are so united, and unity, we say, is strength. And I want to believe that Africa is going to emancipate with such mentality.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nje Lucas. Now have a listen to what Dr. Asong stated earlier. The former Tunisian president had blamed the United States of America of not supporting Tunisians' democracy. Now we're looking at a country that is democratic, but yet the population doesn't have a lot when it comes to the say in the politics of the country. Now would you accuse, or could you accuse President Kais Saied of undermining the country's democracy? And I would like to ask this question: can democracy actually work for every nation?
Yes, democracy is being practiced in every sector in life. Even in the monarch system, we have democracy, because there are times when decisions are sought before they are being taken. Yes, the Americans at a certain point do undermine democracy in other countries, but they want to exalt other countries and democracy in their own country. I want to say that democracy is not limited to a particular country. It is the only form of government where many people can have their voices. The minority have a place, the majority have a place. In the case of Tunisia, where we observed that President Saied single-handedly changed the constitution, because we understand what is involved. And Jigs, I want to say that Tunisia is the country that started the Arab Spring. If we have forgotten so soon, where the young man who had graduated from school felt like everything in the country was now going down, picked up 10 liters of fuel, went to the Ministry of Finance where he set himself ablaze. And here we are today. That Arab Spring went through all the Maghreb regions, and today we are talking about a similar situation being perpetuated by the president of the said country. So I think that democracy, yes, we can practice democracy in every country. And I also want to draw your attention to the fact that China, a few weeks ago, had a decision on zero COVID. But because of what the people came out and they were now chanting and they're now saying, China had to reconsider the decision that they did put up earlier with regards to zero COVID policy. This is to tell you that that is the power of democracy. The people came out, the dominant population were now able to make these changes where we have them the way we have them. So all of this is possible for us to have this in Africa. It is possible for all of this to go across the world. It only depends on the willingness of the people. And we are seeing that today in Africa. We are seeing that today in Tunisia, where the trade union is already calling for a boycott of this election, which is scheduled to be tomorrow. I think the elections were scheduled to be on the 17th. I think it should be between the 7th and the 18th. And the trade union is calling for a boycott, which is, I think it's very normal, because it is their democratic right either to accept elections or to boycott elections. Once
Yeah, right on, sir.
you identify fraud, or once you identify things that are not right with that election, President Said is in total control of the constitution of the country, which gave him reason to do some modifications in 2020.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nje Lucas. We shall be coming back to you. Now, in order to proceed with you, Dr. Asang, having listened to what your co-panelists said, do you think that the international community do have a say, or could have a say, in the politics of Tunisia?
Well, I think according to the UN Charter of 1945, the international community always has a say. But they are not supposed to infringe on the independence and the sovereignty of any state in the world. So they can serve as counselors, they can advise the different governments or states to be able to follow the basic principles of the UN Charter of 1945, democracy, independence, self-determination, sovereignty, and all the like, and that the rule of law should not be violated, and that the people's self-determination should be conserved in every way, because sovereignty, first of all, belongs to the people. So I think that's the role that they have to play, even though sometimes they want to actively participate in the different actions that are being carried out by the population. But I think nowadays things are beginning to change, and so many foreign states are not getting actively involved in the different problems of African nations. And I think that that's something really worth mentioning, and which is good, because Africans have to learn how to resolve their problems, and that we are capable on our own to be able to seek all necessary solutions to the different problems which we have. So concerning Tunisia, the role of the international community has been more of an advisory role. So they have just advised the president of the state to respect the rule of law, and I think that's all what has been done. But I think we are now seeing actively the Tunisian population involving in their own democracy so that they can assure political stability. And that's what we are seeing here, which is a very good thing, especially through this very, very powerful Tunisian trade union. And I think that probably things are going to go on well for the benefit of the population. It is worth mentioning that this trade union is working hand in hand with the Human Rights League of Tunisia, and even with the Lawyers Association of Tunisia. And in 2011, they formed what we call the National Dialogue Quartet, and they are the ones that actually pushed on with the Arab Spring and led to the removal of President Zine El Abidine. So What I can simply say about the international community is that they have played their role perfectly well in just giving advice and being reserved and letting the Tunisian people take their destinies into their hands.
Thank you. Now, over to you, Mr. Nje Lucas. According to Dr. Asong, the UN Charter states that the international community has the right to interfere in the politics of every nation, but how can African countries better manage foreign interference in their internal affairs when it comes to managing the internal affairs of their country? Mr. Nje Lucas?
Yes, the issue of interference is being misinterpreted by many African countries. It doesn't mean that because they talk about this interference, we should allow persons to come in and cause more trouble than solutions that we need in Africa. Let me take the case of Tunisia, for example. In Tunisia, we are talking about this situation that calls for some concern within the Tunisian people. And in this case, if you look at it, if you understand what is on the table, you will realize that the UN Charter that talks about that does not say that the people should come in and cause more harm than good. But what is most important in the case of Tunisia is that it is an organic denial of these elections, meaning it did not actually begin from beyond. It started from within, where these countries are involved and they are members within their trade union. They have decided that this is what they are going to do. So it is an organic decision. It is not an inorganic decision with regards to this context. It was decided by the Tunisian people. The lawyers are involved and many more institutions in Tunisia that stood with the situation in 2011 Arab Spring. They are all involved in this. So this is to tell you that it is something that is starting from within. It is not from beyond. So they may only come in to support, but they cannot come in to add more fuel to an already burning situation.
Thank you, Mr. Nje Lucas. I would like to stay with you. Permit me, Dr. Asong, I would like to ask Mr. Nje Lucas a question before we proceed. Now you're a human rights activist. What implications does this have on the population of Tunisia, given that we have had several protests in the North African country? Mr. Nje Lucas, are you with us?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah, so I was asking that as a human rights activist, what analysis can you make of the human rights situation in Tunisia, given there have been several protests in the North African country?
Yes, firstly, I want to say that there are certain fundamental human rights which we should not go play with. First of all, the people have the right to vote. The people have the right whether to accept a decision taken by an authority or not, especially when it falls within the area where they have a say, like in the case of Tunisia. The people also have a right to participate in whatever decision which is being taken within the context. So I think if these rights are being violated, then the otherwise is bound to happen.
Thank you so much. We shall be coming back to you. Over to you, Dr. Asong. Now it's often said that absolute power corrupts absolutely, and you have listened to what Mr. Nje Lucas said. Now, how true is this of President Kais Saied?
Of course, I think that all the different acts which has been carried out by President Kais Saied clearly demonstrates that he wants to concentrate power, and not only concentrate power, but have absolute power to be able to dominate over all Tunisians and actually deprive Tunisians from their right to self-determination and to independence and sovereignty, which actually belongs to the population of Tunisia. As I earlier on said, there is a national consultative organ or instance which was in charge of actually assisting the president in drafting the constitution, and actually they made proposals to the President Saied, but the president of this commission, Mr. Sabog, clearly stated that the proposition which they made to the president was not respected by the president, and that the constitution which was being voted through a referendum has nothing to do with their proposal which they made to the president. So this is just to show that President Said has become so egoistic in his manner of managing things that he does not even consider the proposals of this commission, which is I was actually in charge or given powers to be able to draft a constitution for the whole Republic of Tunisia. And we thereby see that through this act, he actually wants to carry out things his own way in an authoritative manner. When we look at the constitution of 2022, July, which was voted through a referendum, we realize that there are so many things that have changed as compared to the constitution of 2015. So the constitution of 2015 had Tunisia to be an Islamic state, having Arab as their national language and the rest. But in the new constitution, it talks about Tunisia being partially Islamic, being partially Arab speaking. And I think that is one of the reasons why many people did not participate. It's true that when you look at these articles, you have the impression that it's for the good of everybody. But in democracy, it's about everybody participating. If you even look at the turnout during this referendum, it was very low. It was just about 27 to 30% of all the voters. So it therefore means that 70% of the voters did not participate and they were not in agreement. So normally, a wise president would have recognized and realized that by carrying out such a referendum, which is not representative in majority, is not something good, and actually it will lead to contestations. And this is what we are seeing today. That's why, as you earlier on said, that absolute power actually spoils the meal at the end, because at the end of the day, even though everything he did right up to now was being, the powers were being conferred to him by the Constitution of 2015, but yet because he did not have the active involvement and participation of the population, it is actually leading to what we have today. And that is what this trade union is saying, that his agenda seems to be an individual and personal agenda, and it is not to the interest of the population of Tunisia. This is something he did not take into consideration, and he actually wanted to apply the law in an ideal way, which actually is not the best way of doing things, because we must actually be pragmatic in our manner of governing, so that everybody should be included. We should have some sort of inclusive governance mechanism in all our different regimes, so that at the end of the day, we will not say that some people or a minority actually participated in the affairs of the state, but we'll have a majority. And each time we have a majority, the majority is representative of the nation, and a minority will not say no, because they will understand that it's about democracy, and they can fight for different rights so that things might favor them, but not actually imposing anything. But when we have a minority, of course, we have situations like this, where this Tunisian trade union is actually saying no to the upcoming elections. And I believe their no will actually really be a no, because as I earlier on said, in 2021, they had participated in the Arab Spring, and they actually led to the dismissal of the former president. So this is something they have been doing, and they clearly stated, their president, Noureddin Taboubi, clearly stated that they have been used to doing these things, and they know that their strikes can paralyze the nation. So they know they have power. And this, it's a very good example for us Africans, because we see the power of the civil society. The civil society has a role to support citizens and actually to ensure that their rights are being respected. They are non-governmental organizations and they are non-profit organizations. And we are actually seeing a very powerful and exemplary civil society year. And I think that is something for all African countries to come.
Thank you immensely. Now, in order to proceed with you, Mr. Njay Lucas, Dr. Asong cited inclusive governance. Now we're looking at an African continent where most leaders do stay in power for several years. It's all we're criticizing, but then how can African leaders strive in order to ensure inclusive governance in their respective nations? Mr. Njay Lucas. Mr. Njay Lucas, please, can you activate your mic? We can barely get you.
Yes, I was saying that it is easier for us to actually respect and have inclusive governance, provided we respect the fundamental human rights. If we respect the constitutions the way it is, then we will not have any of the above that we are currently facing. All what we are facing is as a result of violations of the same things that we have agreed before. And when these things come up, we are bound to be where we are today. This is Africa the way it is, not because Africa is meant to be like that. Generally, it does not give you a good picture about Africa that every single year, every single time there is an election in any African country, you must see other things related to the election. I think it is all happening the way it is because we don't want to respect the rule of law. We don't want to respect the fundamental human rights within the African continent. And that is what is actually happening in Tunisia.
Okay, sir. So what does this speak of the African continent as a whole?
It paints a very negative picture. It makes African to look like you can set in at any time, manipulate the African people for your benefit. And this is why there was a time that the Americans were accused of having thwarting democracy in Tunisia. Yes. I think it's because of that. If we respect all of that, then all of this will not be happening in Africa. It is possible that we do the right things because it changes the face of Africa. It makes Africa to be more vulnerable. It causes a lot of division. It makes a lot of persons to take advantage of the current situation and they perpetrate things that are unconstitutional and problematic to the entire continent, thereby holding its growth. Because where there is hostility, persons cannot invest, companies cannot come in. So these are all the negative effects with regards to the entire African continent. But we can all fix this if we go back to start respecting what we have agreed. The charters we have signed, the treaties we have signed, once we respect these treaties, once we put these things in place, all of this is going to stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Talking Point over your Pan-African channel for You Media Africa, where today we are discussing upcoming elections to take place in Tunisia come December 17, 2022, and the ruling labor union that in the North African country has rejected these elections that was proposed by President Kais Saied of the North African country. In order to proceed with you, Dr. Asong, having listened to the recommendations that were brought forth by Mr. Njay Lucas, what should be, or could you give a great piece of advice to the leaders of the North African country when it comes to ruling better their country, especially now that the countries are preparing for elections?
Well, thank you, Sharon, for that question. The first advice I want to give will actually be directed to the leaders, and at this moment, especially President Kais Saied. We must understand that people's and humans' rights must be respected. The principles of self-determination, the principles of independence and sovereignty, as also portrayed by the UN Charter of 1945, must be respected. And being a jurist, you should actually know that the respect of the rule of law is very, very important and vital as concerning governance. It is actually the pillar of governance. And an inclusive governance mechanism should be put in place where we shall have not only the participation of a few in referendums or elections, but we shall have a participation of the majority. Moreover, the propositions of the different commissions having to do with elections and also having to do with consultations with regards to the different laws that have to be implemented or adopted should actually be listened to and be applied. You can't actually take on your own to personally write a constitution. That will obviously bring chaos. And for the population and the civil society, you have to keep on standing up for your rights as you are doing now. And that is what will only lead to a better Tunisia, a democratic Tunisia, where rights are being respected and that sovereignty is conserved. So this is the only way we can make our nation and Africa great again. It is only through the respect of the rule of law and each and every one seeking not his own interests, but seeking the interest of the population as a whole and the interest of Tunisia as a nation.
So lastly, I would like to ask you, as a legal expert, do you think there is a legal way out of the political crisis that is affecting Tunisia?
Well, actually, as per se, we don't have any serious violation of national laws and international laws because, as I earlier on said, Professor Kais Saied, the president, is a jurist. So everything he has been doing right up to now are actually based on is respect of the rule of law. But nevertheless, there are other components which must be considered because when we're talking about the rule of law, you must also think about inclusive governance, which must not be precise in the rule of law, but which can serve more as what we call basic principles or jus cogens, like respecting people's self-determination, respecting people's sovereignty. It might not be portrayed in the law, but as a jurist, you must know that if these things are not included in your different ways or actions, then automatically it would lead to a riot at the end of the day.
Thank you immensely, Dr. Assong. Just to reiterate, you are a member of the Rwandan Bar Association and equally a member of the East African Law Society. To wrap up with you, Mr. Nje Lucas, I'd like to ask you, having listened to all the discussions we've been having so far, what do you think is the way forward for Tunisia? Mr. Nje Lucas, please can you unmute your mic? Mr. Nje Lucas? Okay, so we are gradually coming to an end or coming to the end of today's edition of Talking Points over your Pan-African channel for you Media Africa. So I'll channel this question to you, Dr. Assong. What is the way forward for Tunisia?
Oh, the way forward, we all know, is actually to respect each and everyone's human rights. These are basic principles, inalienable and inherent to everyone. And this actually stems through the principles of self-determination, independence, which are being attributed to everybody, liberty of expression. And our leaders must understand that they must respect these basic principles. If not, the population is going to riot or kick against any action which they put forth. So my advice to all Tunisians is that, and especially to their president, is that you best know the law and you should know that you must respect people's human rights. Everything boils down to that. And I think that if that is being respected and that is being followed, at the end of the day, we shall have a prosperous Tunisia. Thank you.
Come December 17, 2022, Dr. Assong requests that the country should actually put the respect of rule of law first, inclusive governance second, and as well as other aspects. Thank you immensely, Doc, for taking out time out of your busy schedule to join us on today's edition of Talking Points.
Thank you, Madam Sharon, and thank you to all our viewers.
Ladies and gentlemen, we equally had Mr. Nje Lucas, who is a political analyst as well as a human rights activist based here in Cameroon, to talk about this very pertinent topic, Tunisia in the North African country, where a powerful labor union there in the country has rejected a December election slated for December 17. And of course, it was an interesting conversation where we got to evoke several topics, of course, on this subject matter. Ladies and gentlemen, it's on that note that I'll be telling you that we have come to the end of today's edition of Talking Points. I have been Jakes Nabise for presentation. More programs continue over for you, Media Africa. Bye-bye.